origin of the myths is shrouded in mystery. No one knows for certain who gave them to humanity or why. Many theories have been proposed down through the ages to try to explain the origin of the myths and their purpose. During the 19th century, it was regularly taught that the world's myths functioned as a precursor to science and represented early attempts to explain phenomena in the natural world, the origin of volcanoes, the cause of lightning and thunder, the return of spring, the creation of the world and the cosmos in the first place. Later students of myth proposed other theories, such as the assertion that myth grew out of ritual enacted to ensure the return of the sun after winter, to ensure the return of the crops among agricultural societies, to ensure fertility, or victory in battle, or to placate invisible and unknown spirits. However, despite the fact that ancient myth and ritual are clearly interconnected, critics of this theory have noted that it is by no means certain that the myth came from the ritual. It could just as easily be the other way around. It is evident that certain aspects of ritual are so unusual that they require explanation for their origin, and in any case, it is clear that many mythical episodes and epics have nothing to do with ritual whatsoever. Furthermore, the common modern view of ritual is that it too is a form of pre-scientific interaction with the natural world, stemming from a lack of understanding that modern science has since supplied, rendering ancient ritual obsolete, an outdated relic from a more primitive age, supposedly. There is, however, another approach to myth, which has been hinted down through the centuries by certain voices, that all the world's ancient myths and sacred stories actually share a common pattern modeled upon the stars and heavenly cycles, and that they do not represent primitive gropings at all, but rather that they illuminate the truths of another realm, the invisible realm, the realm of spirit, the realm of the gods. According to this interpretation, the endless silent cycling of the stars and other heavenly bodies convey to our understanding the interplay between the visible world and the invisible world. As Alvin Boyd Kuhn has noted, such a system cannot be the product of a lack of understanding. To the contrary, such a system evinces deep understanding deep enough to create the system of metaphor to explain what its creators already understood. As Kuhn writes in Lost Light, reflection of the realities of a higher world in the phenomena of a lower world could not be detected when only the one world, the lower, was known. You cannot see that nature reflects spiritual truth unless you know the form of spiritual truth, and such knowledge would be an a priori requirement to making the comparison at all. To understand what Kuhn is asserting, consider the ingenious Montessori teaching device known as the trinomial cube. The trinomial cube is a way of modeling in physical form the abstract algebraic concept of a polynomial with three terms, cubed. The trinomial cube is a beautiful physical model of an invisible mathematical concept. The model itself could only have been envisioned by someone who already thoroughly understood the concept of cubing a trinomial, for only a very deep understanding of the principles could enable the creation of such an elegant physical representation. If a polynomial of three terms, which we'll call a plus b plus c, is multiplied by itself 3 times, the resulting 27 terms can be represented by the 27 physical blocks that make up the cube. To understand how it works, notice that the cube is divided into 3 sections of different widths. The widest, representing the variable designated A, which is given the color red. The next widest representing the variable B, which is given the color blue. And the smallest, or the narrowest section of these vertical sections, dividing it vertically, the smallest is representative of the variable C and is given the color yellow. This represents A plus B plus C. Because we're going to cube this polynomial A plus B plus C, the same pattern is repeated again vertically, which represents the squaring of the original base. We can see that we have 3 layers stacked on top of each other, with the lowest layer having a height of A. The next layer on top of that has a height of B, and the layer on top of that has a height of C. And finally, because we're cubing this trinomial, we'll multiply this square that we just created by that same trinomial again, A plus B plus C. And so now we see that the depth of the cube is represented by another A plus B plus C. This time the closest layer to us is C deep. The next layer back from that is B deep. And the farthest layer back will be A deep. So this model can now be disassembled into its 27 parts, each of which represents one of the terms in the outcome of cubing the trinomial A plus B plus C. And by observing the height, width, and depth of each block, you can quickly determine what it represents. If you realize that the longest dimension is A, the next is B, and the shortest is C. For example, we'll get 3 cubes in our product. We'll get an A cubed, a B cubed, and a C cubed. We'll also get 6 ABC blocks, represented by blocks that are A in one dimension, and B in another dimension, and C in a third dimension. We'll also get 3 blocks which are C squared by A in height. And then we'll get 3 which are C squared by B in height, and then here's the C cubed. The pattern will be similar for the B products. We'll see there's 3B squared with a height of A, 3 blocks that are B squared with a height of C, and then we'll also have a B cubed. And finally for the A products, we'll see that we have 1A cubed plus 3A squared with a height of B and 3A squared with a height of C. It should be self-evident that this ingenious model, designed to physically represent and convey the abstract concept of a cubed trinomial, could only have been conceived by someone with a deep understanding of the higher concept, as well as an imagination, which would be required to clothe that abstract concept in physical, metaphorical form. No one would argue that early humans who had no conception of algebra decided to just start designing interesting wooden blocks, which they colored with various patterns, and then they just happened to stumble upon a form that was later discovered to perfectly model the abstract concept of a trinomial cubed. Similarly, as Alvin Boyd Kuhn argues so insightfully, the myths which use the motions of the sun, moon, stars, and visible planets, as well as the cycles of the seasons and the interplay of light and dark throughout the year to ingeniously model the interplay of the visible and invisible realms, and to convey profound spiritual truths which can also be shown to align very well with the discoveries of quantum physics and the interaction of a state of pure potential and a state of manifestation, must have been created by someone with deep knowledge of both. Reflections of the invisible realm in the phenomena of the visible realm could not be perceived by those with no knowledge of the invisible. In fact, deep knowledge of the other realm is an a priori requirement in order to hit upon the use of the visible motions of the stars and heavenly cycles as a perfect model for conveying truths about that invisible other world using the phenomena of this visible world. Those who are still connected to the ancient wisdom given to their people have explained that the invisible realm is actually the source and origin of everything in this visible world. The invisible world is all around us. The ancient myths show us this invisible realm in a manner that we can understand, in much the same way that the incredible Montessori teaching model of the trinomial cube makes visible the abstract algebraic concept of a plus b plus c cubed.